Okay, so now we're going to jump in right into the talk. Tonight's company is extremely exciting to me. When I first heard Mike speaking about Framestore, I was blown away simply because of the level of sophistication of the business they have and the results they have. They won every major award there is to win in their industry. The company has 2 Oscars, they have 3 Oscar nominations, they have over a dozen of BAFTAs and Emmy Awards. The company started in 1986 and this year they won the Oscar for the movie Gravity. Technology behind that took them 3 years to perfect. So this tells you they are still on top of the game, which is extremely rare in high-tech business. So without any further ado, please give a big applause to the CEO of the company, William Sargent, and Mike McGee, both co-founders, and Mike is also the creative director. Are we mic'd on? Mics are working. Can you guys hear us? Okay, so just to start, we can, why don't we introduce ourselves a little bit. So Mike, do you want to start and tell us something about you personally?
Sure. I'm Mike McGee, creative director of Framestore. When we started back in 1986, I'd been out of university, I think about 8 or 9 months. I got one job after I'd come out of university, and the technology that we were using, or I was using in that first job, it was actually using a digital box to take news stills, retouch them so that they could be put into a newspaper. And that was my full-time job, and pretty quickly we realized that that tool could be used in a much more powerful way to work on moving images. So that's where I came from. I went to art school. I'm trained as a graphic designer. I'm very much an artist in this technology world. But Framestore, of course, is made up of people that are very artistic and very technical. So what I bring to what I do is a strong artistic eye, and then I team up with people who are much more technical than me to execute the very technical parts of what we have to do. So that's kind of my background.
So William, how about you? So do you want to tell us something about your background?
I did business and law in university, and then wanted to be in the creative industry. So all the businesses I've ever done, and Framestore is an example of one, have always been in creative industries, partnering normally with world-class people. Spinning Image being one example, SN, which was a games industry, being another one. Framestore obviously being the ultimate example. So someone who's applied business skills to basically partnering and enabling people who make amazing work.
So we have a video which we would like to show you at the beginning, just to show you what Framestore is and what they do. So let's play it. So you were 5 founders, because the usual business books, they say 3 founders are just enough. If it's more than that, complications start. You guys had nothing, no problems linked with having too many founders?
No, I think because we all had very different skill sets, and we all had a common goal. That one of the interesting things was that from the first day that we started up, getting images in and out of the computer involved all 5 of us working as a team, literally operating to technical equipment to get it in. So, and then the same thing would happen with invoicing and the bookkeeping. You know, we were all kind of helping each other out.
So you have complementary skills.
Yeah,
and we helped
each other.
one another, and
Yeah.
we helped one another. We had opinions about one another's jobs as well.
Okay.
And the good thing, the strength of the team was that we felt confident enough about our own skills to be questioned by our colleagues who may not know that skill. So I would have people saying, well, why is the business plan that way, William? And that was fine, because quite often one of our colleagues had better opinion, better thoughts about the business plan than I had. So that was a good challenge.
Interesting.
And that was the thing. It was a confidence in one another that made it very powerful.
When you were starting, what was the biggest pain you wanted to solve with your business?
Well, it was more of a challenge, really, that the sorts of work that I was doing was the sort of work that was being executed at the time was all very, because it was analog, everybody was used to the sort of images that you could create at the time. This birth of new technology, when we started, we were right on the cusp of a digital explosion. So from day one, when I sat at that computer, the images that I was creating were fresh and brand new, and people were like, wow, how have you done that? So for us, it was creative. We wanted to be as creative as we possibly could and have the freedom to work on projects that we were excited about. The business that I was working for previously had a different vision of where the technology could go and how it should be used, and we could see an opportunity to use it differently.
One of the things that we have pursued from the very beginning is the art form on screen and the platforms on screen. So in the early days, the art form that was innovative was music videos. So we did things like Aha and Michael Jackson, people like that in Dire Straits in the early days. That was where the directors were doing the challenges. Now some of the interesting new places are virtual reality and cinema and new forms of storytelling. So we like the fact that we operate on every platform, whether it be a phone at one end through to an installation, because what we're doing is telling stories. And so the tools that we use, as Mike described then, was a Framestore to be able to do digitally paint something and put it out. So that's the sort of, we've pursued the opportunities as they arose.
Yeah.
And back then you were based just in London. You had no other
Soho.
How hard was it to get into those movies, being based in London and having Hollywood being based across the
Well, the problem that we had back in the early 90s was that people felt that our type of work for films couldn't be done outside of Los Angeles. Obviously, the Hollywood studios were quite sort of inward-looking in terms of films. And so convincing people that they could cross the ocean and do work was a big challenge. And just getting meetings and getting in the door was hard work. But we, it's the old story. You just keep knocking on the doors and you start doing good work and you find solutions. I mean, what we're generally trying to do, and Gravity is the ultimate example of it, someone has a creative problem or business problem, the studio's trying to re-engineer the cost in filmmaking. If you can come up with some solutions, and we did, not just us, but the community in London, which is considered, I mean, we have the benefit of a cluster. I mean, you heard just now talking about clusters. Clusters are a very important economic benefit to be part of in that. And in London, the creative industries is incredibly powerful. And we effectively have worked off the back of the design and music business in the 60s and the 70s, which then led to advertising in the 70s and 80s. So we've ridden a number of creative waves, and now, because what we do is apply technology quite often to the creative process, it's just another wave which London's riding at the moment, and each one is reinforcing and building on the previous one. And that, so.
Also, sorry, just also to add to that, the relationships you build with a director who might start his career doing a television commercial or a pop video and then goes on to make a feature film, the relationships you have will make him, you keep them. Yeah.
And the original vision, how did it change over the years? Because you've been in the business for a very long time. Did the focus change, or you still keep doing what you wanted to do at the beginning?
What do you think, Mike?
I think it's an evolution. I mean, the technology moves so quickly that our people have to constantly, every 6 months, we're learning new software and there are new tools to execute the shots. But creativity is what people look to us for. It's not just the tools to execute the shots. So when they come into Framestore, we're offering creative solutions, we're offering a creative partnership. And for the employees of Framestore, if you work in the film department, it doesn't mean you only work on films. You might do a film one day, and then you're helping to solve how to make a photoreal Audrey Hepburn in a TV commercial. And those same guys recently are helping us solve the challenges of virtual reality and bringing the same image quality into the virtual world. So you get to work on a real spread of challenging, innovative projects and to develop tech to go with that.
It's very interesting. Technology-wise, obviously in this business you have to take decisions which are influencing many years in advance. What were the biggest mistakes you did at the beginning when it comes to technology?
Gosh. Well, every now and then we would buy a box for several hundred thousands of pounds that, with hindsight, you looked and wished you'd bought a different box. So I think that's probably the simplest one, where you chose the wrong technology which didn't become the industry standard. So even though it was better than the industry standard, so part of what we're trying to do when we're working with technology partners is to evaluate what their long-term potential is. Because we, particularly now that things are fundamentally software, even when they're based on hardware, there's a lot of pain you go through if you're an early adopter, and and it uses all your best people to debug things. I mean, Oculus was an example recently, where we worked the guys from the very early days to help the platform get to a place where we could actually use the Oculus Rift to be able to deliver a product on that. And so you have to be very careful about choosing your partners. And occasionally we've chosen the wrong partner and then found ourselves 3 years later having to change horses to a different partner. And if we bought 1,000 licenses or something and invested $1 million and you have to backtrack, then that gets to be unfortunate.
Talking about technology, you guys probably know Slido, which we are using here. What you see on the big wall is a way for you to ask questions if you want. Basically, if you all open a browser if you want to, it's a very simple thing. You don't need to download anything. You just open the browser and type in the link on top, which is sli.do/sgl. No login, no password. You simply ask your question and it's going to come up here. And you can actually vote for the best question you like, and those popular questions we'll be asking here during the Q&A session. So feel free to ask questions you want, and just in case you're interested, the hashtag for tonight is Startup Grind. Now, going from technology into business, were there any big business mistakes which you would not do again? We have in the audience startups and people who are in business. What do you think are the key lessons you've learned having done business for so long?
I'll start with you, Mike.
Oh, that's cheating. I'm the creative. I think, well, I was talking with Sharon, one of our other founders, yesterday, and from a business, she was saying that maybe we started too modestly, that we were a little too conservative in a way, because had we known how successful we could have been, had we gone in bigger, borrowed more money, had bigger premises right from the start, then we could have taken off a lot quicker. And yeah, I suppose that was, but at the same time, you balance that against the fact that we only thought we were going to be a 25-person company at most, and wanted it, and we liked that boutique-y feel. We liked the size we were for the 6 months, but we grew very quickly, and we're lucky enough to be making profits from day one. So. And
how many people are working there right now?
It's just over 900, heading for 1,000 at the moment.
900, wow.
Yeah.
For a studio, this is enormous.
You need that amount of people if you're going to work on big movies.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And majority is based here in London, right? In Soho.
Well, we have the biggest team is here, and a lot of the technology team is here. Montreal, New York, and Los Angeles are the other teams, which are much smaller.
Mm-hmm. And so the biggest mistake you say is one of the biggest is getting funding earlier, having big enough ambitions, and.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that, as I've said, it was a mistake. I'm not sure it was a mistake because we've been successful. It was that it's that balancing of if we had done that, would that have been better?
Would we have been able to manage the business? Because that's the other thing. It's you balance out. As you say, we could have taken bigger risks, but in fact, if you look at our entire history, we've been very cautious. And you look back and wonder. There were certainly opportunities. You look back and say, "Gosh, if only we doubled at that point or whatever it is." On the other side of it, you go, there are occasions when you look at it and say, oh, I'm glad we didn't. So your success is determined by the things you manage to avoid quite often.
Yes. I was at an event recently organized by Tech City UK, and there was a lady called Sherry Coutu, and she was doing this research about fast-growing companies. And she said one of the biggest issues they reported is talent, hiring talent. How is Framestore going about it?
Well, hiring talent is one of our key things because we are a people business. It's all about the talent of our people that can produce the quality of images that we need. So we put an enormous amount of effort into recruiting globally. At one point, there was a world shortage of people to come into our industry because the demand for effects in movies was growing so rapidly that we were all scrambling for the same people. So one of the things we did several years ago was to look at education and work out where we were finding our best talent from, and seeing if there was a way of growing our own and getting more involved in that process. We noticed actually that we were employing a lot of European students, and we're trying to work out what their universities were doing differently for them, so that we could help the UK universities to also give us people that we could employ. So after several discussions and meetings with different establishments, one of our solutions was actually to open a kind of a Framestore University, is that what you call it, at one of the colleges. We actually put some equipment in, and then we put real jobs into that place, and we pay money for the work that's done there. Then the students in return get to work on real projects. They get paid for the work they do, but when they come out, they're trained up in the way that we work. If they're very good, or if they're good, they get offered a job at Framestore, and it's a really good way we found of growing talent that's really relevant for what we do.
So you're finding talent early.
As early as possible.
We also met at Unreal University. If you guys know, Unreal University is a pop-up university, free, which is organized by Unruly Media. We have a product director here, track somewhere over there. And so Mike was giving a speech there. This is actually how I discovered Framestore, and I was quite impressed by that. So going forwards from the talent pool, what are the biggest challenges for you now at the present time?
The biggest challenges now. What are the biggest challenges at the present time? I think it's still the same, that technology is moving at such a speed that we have to. Budgets seem to be squeezed more and more, and it's being able to keep the quality of what we do up to a very high standard. Work to shrinking deadlines, and also trying to find more efficient ways of doing what we do, keeping our costs down, and looking for new markets also to expand into.
I was going to say, I mean, we did a talk to our colleagues about 2 years ago now. In fact, it was spring of 12, and I was trying to give a perspective of what the challenges facing us. I remember the time saying something that I sort of wondered whether I'd be entirely wrong, which was to say to my colleagues that in 5 years' time, which is now 3 years away, we were going to need 50% of the skills that we needed we didn't have. Right? So therefore, that was one statement, which I thought, well, I might as well make a radical statement. It's turning out to be fairly true, but it seemed like slight exaggeration at the time. But I thought, let's make something bold, because it'll get people's attention. The implication being, obviously, that people had to learn a lot of new skills, etc. So that was point number one. And secondly, that half the customers that we were going to have in 5 years' time, we didn't have at that point. And of the ones that we didn't have, they were unlikely to be people that had a direct line of vision to us. So, for example, there were companies that didn't exist. There were companies in this room that may become customers in 3 years' time. And so how are they going to know that we exist, etc. So if you look back 10 or 15 years, you know, the Googles and Amazons and that, which are now major clients for digital services of various types, you know, how would you have known to be in the right room in the right place to become a key partner with them and that? So finding the people who are the new customers, finding the new talent, which are skills that we currently don't have. Do we know how to recruit them or find them? You know, did we ourselves understand what the new skills were, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the sort of things which turned out to be, you know, myself and Mike are living this at the moment and that, and thank God we we made that rather radical proposal to our colleagues because everybody energized themselves and got stuck into thinking, if it's going to be that bad, William, then we better all start retraining, etc., which is exactly what happened.
That's a really interesting point. So how do you find companies which are coming, which are popping up, which are eventually disrupting your industry? Where do you find those?
Well, on the technology side, in terms of disrupting our business, and not supplying products that we can use, you know, I mean, Kickstarter is a good example. I mean, you know, our guys love tracking Kickstarter in order to see what interesting things are coming up, and quite often we'll contact those people and say, that's a pretty cool piece of technology that we could use. So that's one way. So there are various ways of keeping yourself. One of the great things, of course, about the internet and digital world is that actually it's quite easy to track down things around the world in that. So that's sort of, that's one of the ways of doing it. In terms of trying to identify who to work with or that, again, it's scanning. It's making everybody's job to scan the horizon, either for a new colleague or a new piece of technology, or, as you just said, disruption, to identify what disruption is going on. Because disruption doesn't tend to happen overnight. You know what I mean? Disruption starts quite slowly. When it gathers momentum and then obviously hits you with a sort of like, you know, sort of quite a heavy blow in the end. But if you're careful, you can spot some of the disruptions coming away.
And this sounds especially interesting in your case because you are on top of the technology development, yet you are big, hence probably slower than any small startup of 5 people. So how do you balance this out with being able to stay on top and keeping an eye on interesting movements on the market? So you say Kickstarter.
Well, one of the things that we do, we have a very messy business model in that because we operate on every platform, and we encourage our colleagues to sort of explore stuff. And so quite often things are going around about the margins that we're not aware of, because people are doing cool stuff and trying to find stuff and that. So by giving permission to people within your company, particularly as you say, if you're bigger, so that they themselves turn up with surprises is one of the great pleasures. And you know, virtual reality was a good example of that. You know, the guys were completely on top of that from the very beginning, without any prompting or enabling, just because they knew that they could do that type of stuff. So part of the way of keeping yourself nimble is to depend upon your colleagues, particularly your younger and more junior colleagues, to have the motivation to do it and feel that they can achieve it within the company. Normally the reason people do a startup and leave your company is because they don't feel they can pursue that vision or the ambition or the piece of interesting work they want to do within your own company.
That's how you started, right?
Which is effectively, we started because we couldn't achieve it somewhere else.
Yeah, just to give you one example of that, we were working on a real-time animation system for being able to interact with CG characters on the internet. So we had a team in the commercials division developing game engine technology and coming up with a PlayStation kind of handset that could drive this character on screen. And then up at the film department where we were making Dobby, one of the guys in that department whose father was an engineer had actually designed this hand-controlled device to move a Dobby in real time with this hand animation system. But the two of them were working, because they were personal projects, they were both working these off the radar and didn't realize they were developing something that was very similar and could actually share, you know, investment of time that had been put into them. And so once these people connected, suddenly we leapt forward in, you know, 6 months or 12 months of development by merging the two.
But that was unplanned. So that's the problem, is how do you create that infrastructure ecosystem once you get to a bigger size is one of the big challenges. Because on the one hand, you don't want to fit away time and effort and money with stuff that may end up going nowhere. But at the same time, you don't want to get in the way of people who understand the market better than you do sometimes.
That's true.
And looking forward, what's the question earlier about the challenges going ahead is that there are new environments and new ways of telling stories now, like the Oculus and virtual reality, that we have the current way of doing TV commercials and feature films, but this new immersive way of experiencing storytelling and the new ways that you can tell a narrative. It doesn't have to be a linear story anymore. The techniques of telling that story are changing as well. So for our guys that might be working in the traditional fields, they get all excited because everybody wants to work on if you're creative, you want to work on the most creative projects and the coolest projects. So it's exciting because there are opportunities always, but we also have to keep your people focused on on their day jobs as well.
Totally. And when it comes to tools, are you using tools which are already available on the market? Do you are making it a bit more suited for your own purposes?
A mixture. I mean, obviously there are industry standard tools. Sometimes we've been involved in helping create them in the first place. And then quite often what we're doing is creating the glue that pulls them together into a pipeline. So generally, again, I come back to the concept of applied technology. What's important for us is to be part of a technology ecosystem that A, we're aware of and feeds into us, and then we can sort of pick the bits that are relevant to the job. So the tools are your industry standards, you know, your Mayas, your products like that. And then other ones are ones we write. We've got a lot of developers, so quite often we're writing pieces of code that then glue it all together.
Okay.
But we also do things like with Gravity, the tools and technologies to execute the shots for that film didn't exist 5 years ago when we started on the film. So one example was that we needed to move a camera at very high speed down a track and stop within millimeters of Sandra Bullock's eye, then spin around her head and shoot back out again. The tech didn't exist, so we looked at other technologies that are available today, and we took a car manufacturing production line robot and we converted it into a high-speed motion control camera. And then our animation data would drive that rig. And that was just one part of a series of things with LED panels that had never been used to light people before, and a motion simulator that moved the actors around. And it was those three technologies being put together in a way that had never been used before in filmmaking.
That how do you pitch these technologies when you are pitching for the movie? How does the industry work? So you have this idea and you don't know yet how you deliver.
I think the studio hopes we know what we're doing. Because, you know, in our business, you know, you might spend 2/3 of the budget before it's obvious that you're failing. So there has to be a degree of confidence and
That's
faith,
true.
because generally the brief is very simple. Do something for me that hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
And so the answer is, okay, well, we think we've got an idea. And you sit down and intellectually work out what you think the approach is, but until you implement, until you apply it, and of course in applying it you discover all sorts of assumptions that were wrong, and you have to sidetrack on that. So as a result, we're in an industry where, you know, obviously credibility and capability is important to the clients, who will be spending $30 to $50 million on the digital part of the production. And they have to believe that you have the right people, the right team building, the right skills, etc. and that. And as I say, generally, most films you've been asked to do something, because the point of a new film is to show you something visually that, you know, is interesting and different visually. Otherwise, why are you going to spend $10 to go to a movie in the first place?
It's true. So now the studios know what you're doing, and it should not be very hard for you to get new businesses because you kind of have the testimonials already. When you were starting, how was it? How can a company which is starting really break through into those big studios and convince them that they can trust you? How did you make it?
Well, you do it a little bit at a time. I mean, you know, in the end, you get business because you inspire confidence in a consumer or another business that you can be there for them and that. And being there for them might be doing it at half the price they usually expect, because you've re-engineered the process, or the product is better than they can currently buy in the market, or, you know, and you obviously start, you know, when we started, we knew we wanted to work in film, but in those days, you know, the cost of chips and the cost of storage was unbelievably expensive, so therefore the resolution was television resolution, but we knew we wanted to work on film. We were working in Soho, but we knew we wanted to work in the world. So as far as we were concerned, we started as a global business, but we were in Soho and we could barely get the attention of people 2 streets away. But then we got as far as the M25, and then we got as far as the rest, you know what I mean? So it's sort of, we wanted to be global, but we just had to start with the guy in the next street and say, look, we can help you do that little bit of your film, and it's less challenging, but if we do it amazingly well, then that person will recommend us to the next person. And, you know, it's amazing how, you know, it's a lot of little steps. As long as you've given yourself the long-term goal, then it's a bunch of little steps.
Yeah, I think there's also, because the workforce, that there is a global workforce, people do move around between the companies. Your company philosophy, your company ethos, the way you treat people is also carries a lot. So you can attract the talent, and that then affects the quality of your output as well. So by making sure that we look after people, and that we run a company where people want to work, where well, I myself still love going in to work and doing the job I do. I think I'm one of the luckiest people in the world to do the job I do. And that's what we try to create as a culture within the company. So I think all of that contributes to how we're perceived by clients, as well as being a very creative and problem-solving bunch of people.
Okay, so when you look at the industry, who do you consider your biggest competitors?
Well, there are many. I mean, you look at Weta in New Zealand, for example, who obviously done Lord of the Rings and Hobbit and that. The thing about our industry is that we know a lot of people there, colleagues that have worked there and come to us and vice versa. So you look at companies like that, you look at, a great admirer of John Lasseter and the guys at Pixar and what they do, the guys at Weta. Here in London, there are companies moving pictures and Double Negative who do fine work. So it's quite, on the one hand, it's a small industry in that companies at the top, there's a handful of. It's an industry in where it's unbelievably competitive. I've named some of the ones that I admire. There are companies small companies that have done really cool stuff. So you tend to admire the work. We're only as good as the jobs we've done this year. And so the fact that we've done something great last year,
you got the Oscar this year, so you're
doesn't count for next year, exactly. It doesn't get us the next job, so it doesn't.
It's true. And so what do you think is the competition admiring on Framestore most at the moment? Is it the creativity, as you said?
Yes, I think with Gravity, it was the ingenuity and the groundbreaking innovation. There was so many of them in that film that, and the film took 5 years to make. We had 400 people working on that movie across a 5-year period, and I think the respect for the fact that the effects were real. They weren't sci-fi, very imaginative things that you can get away with a lot of. You put big explosions on and bright colors. You can disguise a lot of things, because everybody has seen enough footage from NASA to know what it should look like in space. It had to look photoreal. So I think that the respect that we got from the whole of the industry, actually, for the quality of the work that was produced on that film, is what people now regard us as is producing the best quality, seamless work.
Mm-hmm. So looking at Framestore today, where is it to where you want it to be?
Gosh, well, don't forget, we didn't have a plan to get beyond the second or third year in terms of, we take each year as it comes. The simplest thing, I know what I personally want us to be part of, in that we tell stories is what we do. We help people tell stories. So we either tell them ourselves or we help people tell the stories. Stories going forward are going to be told across all the platforms at the same time. And we'll be consuming stories. So whether you get part of it on your phone, your iPad, television, you go to cinema on that, we're not going to be getting it on a single delivery mechanism, right? And once you buy into a world like Game of Thrones or something else, where you've enjoyed the world, you like the characters, you relate to them, that you would like to consume more and different ways of the story, the backstory, the front story, follow one of the characters, find out something about an incident there wasn't an explanation there, but actually be quite interested in all about it. So there is a director out there who's already directing who will be able to tell a story in a non-linear, multi-platform way, in a way that we're going to be excited and enthused. And as far as I'm concerned, I want us to be the people that make that happen. I have no idea who that person is. He may be a colleague of ours, for all I know. But when we look out 5 or 10 years, we will be absorbing these stories and narratives in ways that aren't just a single device in a single place in a single straight line.
So as companies grow and your company is very big, creativity is something which very often gets kind of killed by the size of the company, by processes, by procedures. How do you keep it going? How do you keep people to have the fresh look and to stay creative? What are your secrets?
Well, it's an interesting one. I mean, it's a number of things. One is that when we work on a project, we put a team together, and we run that team almost as a small company. So they're a very strong unit. They socialize together. We run events for the number of people on that. We share as a company the work that the different teams are all doing. So we have regular catch-ups and regular screenings of each other's work. So you keep a little bit of a competitive element in there, because everybody wants to do better than their colleague next door. And it's the fact that we keep sharing ideas and challenging people to raise the standard all the time. And then we're just lucky that we have a bunch of very creative people that are passionate about what they do. So they they kind of drive that themselves. We give them the right environment and the right culture, and then, as William said earlier, we let them experiment and play on things outside of their day job, and they do the rest.
It's interesting, as when I look back at the last 5 years, I feel we have failed to be as effective in doing that. And I've been very conscious this past year of exactly that problem and trying to work out how do we facilitate that. And you know, you look at someone like Google, who obviously can afford to say, spend a day a week doing something else than that, and our margins are slightly smaller than Google, so we have to sort of find other ways. I'm about to try an idea. Quite often we've crowdsourced within the company creative ideas. So if we're doing a pitch for some project, then you put out into the company, oh, who knows about this or that or the other? It's amazing some of the ideas that come back in. So crowdsourcing within a company is quite an interesting way of unlocking energy, particularly where you guarantee people they're not going to take a day job away, so they're not going to take another job away from having the ideas. In other words, you know, sometimes people are afraid of putting forward good ideas in case they get lumbered with having to execute it on top of their day job. So that's one of the issues about crowdsourcing. But we're about to try an idea, because we're very good at prototyping ideas, whether it's pitching an idea, creating a pitch for a client, or developing a piece of technology to do a solution. So I feel that prototyping is one of our core skills. And we're going to try the idea of funding ideas internally and giving people some of the financial benefits of that. And we're going to start crowdsourcing that. So it's something we're going to announce this month within the company, this idea of crowdsourcing products. And by products, I mean what they mean in the technology world as products, as in software solutions or not just a hardware item and that. And so I'm trying to see if I can find the way of structuring this energy and innovation, because as you correctly point out, when you get beyond a certain size, it gets more difficult. And when I look back in the last 5 years, I look at opportunities that I felt we lost because we didn't have ways of the ideas escalating to the part of the company which might have been able to support it or fund it. So it's a real challenge when you get beyond. And I remember my colleagues in other companies in the early days told me that, you know, when you get to 200 people, you run into a barrier, a management barrier, of you suddenly need HR people and teams and that. So that becomes...
Did it happen to you?
It happened to us. And then someone told us that it happens at 450 people. And so at 450, I was ready. I was thinking, okay, 450, we're not going to make the mistakes everybody else made. And we made every one of them, even though this is what my colleagues in San Francisco had predicted this is what they went through, and we went through it. And so there are points, remember 800 is the other point at which people predict you have a real problem. So
you're already beyond that.
So there are known points at which you run into issues of how do you keep energy going, how do you keep innovation going, how do you keep people feeling as though they're part of a team. You know, we tried for ages to hide the fact that we were over 600 people at one point. And because you felt that people would feel they were part of something big. And one of the benefits, as Mike has pointed out, is that people work in teams. They'll work on a project team for 6 months or 12 months, and they get quite collegiate within that project. So as a management person, that is the issues of how in a technology company you keep that going, and it's a real issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So creativity is something which is really interesting because it's not very tangible. It's not really clear to how to harness it, how to support it in companies. There's a very interesting book by the president of Pixar, Ed Catmull, and he's basically proven his theory because they were supposed to, when they were acquired by Disney, they were supposed to take over the studio, the animation studio from Disney, which was basically failing. They produced a couple of unsuccessful movies, and they applied their logic of supporting creativity into Disney, and now they are back on track, and they're apparently doing well.
They've got John Lasseter.
Yes, as well. Yeah.
They have one of the great creatives in the world in that. But you're right, they did apply the Pixar philosophy to the Disney animation studio and obviously ended up with Frozen.
Yes, and he says that the same people who were producing before those bad movies, unsuccessful ones, they're now producing movies like Frozen. And he also says that every single movie at the beginning is crap. Is a bad idea, it doesn't work. And it's the process of iterations which makes it better and better and better. Is it the same in your experience?
Yes and no. I'm in public, I'm online now, so I have to be a little more delicate. One of the frustrations quite often is that not enough time is given to the front end of a film. And a film goes into production really before all of the creative issues have been sorted out. So the answer is Pixar don't allow themselves to go in. They have the luxury because they're so successful to actually, and they control because they're making a movie, as well as originating it. So they have the benefit of doing it the right way, which is to wait until the elements are right. And that requires a lot of self-discipline if you do it in a technology company, of not launching the product. I'm trying to think of examples. People in the audience probably can think of examples of products that were delayed for a year or two when everybody else is coming to market, but actually it wasn't, the individuals were disciplined enough to hold it back. And when you're obviously needing money and things like that, the discipline to hold something back that's not ready is a challenge. Mm-hmm. So it's normally, when we look back at the mistakes that we've made on a film, it tends to be because we got the first 3 months wrong. We made the wrong calls, we rushed something, we didn't put the right people on it, et cetera, et cetera. We can look back to that first quarter and think, gosh, we really shouldn't have ignored that particular danger signal.
That's interesting. Before we take some questions from the audience, let's talk about the future a little bit. Like you mentioned, some technologies, some visions which you have for the business. What keeps you on your toes? Where do you think are the biggest challenges in your business for the next 3-4 years?
Well, I think as William touched on there, it's the new immersive ways of storytelling. So the technologies, I think, don't exist yet. They're still being developed. So we don't know what's going to be possible, and it's moving at such a speed that once I have clients now where this project that we finished for the Game of Thrones show, they look at it and they say, we want one of those. But I'm already saying, but by the time you say that, it's already out of date. So what you should be doing is coming to us, partnering with us, getting close to us. The technology is now at this place, and tell us what your problem is, and let's work together to create something innovative that will be fresh and new by the time it comes out. So for us, it's all about finding the right partnerships early enough, and building strong relationships with brands or agencies or anybody that needs to tell a good story.
That's interesting. So you keep them on their toes to keep an eye on what's happening, and you basically work together as you come closer to those possibilities, technology-wise.
Yes, I mean we develop tools, don't we? And the tools that we develop, it's the people that you have the close relationships that ideally you would share those tools with. Mm-hmm. So the people that buy in.
I think we're very lucky to be based in London. I personally feel I love living. I've been living in London for 30 plus years now. I came from Ireland, and the energy and the creativity of just life in general. The concept of pop-ups and pop-up restaurants, pop-up everything. In other words, there's so much going on that walking the streets, particularly over this end of London, the east end of London. I love food and trying new food now. The most interesting food experiences are, northeast London traditionally at the moment, So the idea of walking the streets and trying out things and being in an audience where people have new ideas, it's sort of remembering that's where your roots are, mm-hmm. and trying to immerse yourself into that with an open mind. That's the most difficult thing to do, because it's very easy just to think, oh, you know what, we are successful, we do it, let's just redo what we did last year. And if we did that, we'd be out of business in 24 months. Okay. And so that's the difficulty, is we sort of reinventing ourselves at a point when, we've been in the business for nearly 30 years now. That's the challenge in some ways. In
a tech business, it's a huge challenge.
Exactly.
And do you see the business expanding into other areas?
Oh yeah, but I don't know what they are. Yes is the answer, but I don't know what they are. I mean, I'm keeping a lookout for them. I'm talking to people. I'm exploring things. I'm looking at forms of entertainment. I'll give you an example. One of the things I love here in London is Secret Cinema, which is a lot of fun. And got involved with them in a couple of projects and that. But just the whole concept of that form of physical immersion in a story and being able to go places with it, it's being slightly incoherent, but an example is, there's physical experiences that I'd love to tell, of which Secret Cinema is a good example. Mm-hmm.
Well, also with virtual reality, my exposure to that over the last 6 months, where having been used to somebody who spent probably a third of his youth sat in front of a television set, just watching anything on 4 channels, just glued to the TV, to now be able to put a headset on, and for me it's more interesting watching other people with a headset on, because the reactions that people have are physical. People that are scared of heights feel like they're suffering from vertigo. The people that don't like fast motion get motion sickness. These headsets can create emotional experiences that are far more memorable than sitting in a seat looking at a flat screen. So for me, the exciting areas are going to come when we create a way of creating an emotional response for everyone in this room, not just an individual in a headset, and what technologies are going to take us to that place. So.
I'd love to see, 3-4 years down the road and see what possibilities are there. There's actually one member of our group which is working on a startup. It's called Invisible Cinema. It's a cinema with a blindfold on, and they're using 3D sound, which is it is interesting as a disruption on the market.
Yeah, that's one of the crucial things for virtual reality as well. Actually, if you put the headset on. Yeah. Is if something that you're looking at happens to your left side, that the audio has to be three-dimensional, has to wrap around.
Yeah. Now, before we come to the questions from the audience, if you would have to start again, knowing what you know now, what differences would you make in terms of how you started the business?
The problem is, if you know what you know now, you wouldn't start a business. So actually, it's good not to know.
We don't know that.
You know now. That would be the observation, because actually, the thing that's most consistent is you know, in the end, you have to believe in yourself and be passionate about it. And if you are, then you got some chance of getting there. And as I say, if you even think about all the barriers that are going to be in your way, it's too exhausting. So therefore, you just get on with doing what is exciting you. So, I mean, that's about an incoherent answer, but
yeah, I'm with you, William. I think that when I think back to starting the company, it was out of a desire to do something different, to make a change, and to have some control over your own destiny. And we certainly had that. But when recessions come along and slam you're also right in the thick of it, and you have to find your way out, which leads to a lot of very uncomfortable, sleepless evenings, and worry as well. So. You balance that against the control of your own destiny and your creativity, and I'm just happy that, as you said, we're still here, 28 years on.
Yes, that's very perfect. So now let's take some questions from the audience. The first question is, how do you plan to make your own feature film? Do you plan to make your own feature film just like Pixar did? I know you did this film called The Tale of Despero.
Yeah, the answer is we have explored various things of co-owning intellectual property, of which Despero is an example where we helped make it with Universal. We're not in that. We don't have the balance sheets and the depth of money to do that. So I think I see us partnering with people rather than originating it ourselves.
Okay. Then we have a question. How does it feel to be acquired? I don't know if you've been acquired. You acquired another company, right?
We merged our business with a public vehicle back in '96, I think it was, wasn't it? And it was a mistake.
What was a mistake?
It didn't feel like a mistake at the time, but it was, and we bought ourselves back out 4 years later. It wasn't fun. But on the other hand, we did it for reasons which I probably would, with hindsight, do it again. Mm-hmm. But once we got into the situation, it was during the .com period, and people had a different view we had a different view of the day of what .com was all about. And so we ended up buying ourselves back out in a really tough deal, which was no fun.
Oh, interesting. Let's take some questions from the audience here as well. If you guys want to ask, there you go.
So shall we just say something about how pristine the work is going to be ideally before production starts, right? And other side might say something about how we're trying to find new ways of making.
I think you've got a microphone there.
Sorry. Does it work?
Yeah.
So again, was interested to hear from Sir William how the bit around that you wish that sometimes it's nicer to have a more complete creative vision before a project starts, and it doesn't happen. And on the other side, Mike says something about okay, let's try to find new ways of storytelling. Now, those two things, in my opinion, sometimes clash, especially if you consider the non-linear stories and the co-ownership of your viewership in that respect. The people that are collaborating to the creation. And I'm not expecting a simple answer, but do you have like a recipe or a way to approach these kind of problems, so that you foresee that are going to come in the future?
I think what I was saying was not that you got to be perfect before you start. What I was sort of saying is you have to decide the story you're telling, and the problems sometimes we have is that it hasn't been fully worked out to such an extent that you're starting hoping that you're going to sort it out in the production process, and it's very rare that the production process you can debug all the things that you. So my view is that the cheapest part of the process is the origination of it, and that's the time to spend the time and the energy and the money getting it right. And quite often not enough is done because a film is needed for a particular release slot, or the actors are only available in that particular 6-month period and that. And so it's under preparation is probably a better way of putting it rather than trying to get perfection before you start, you know.
Yeah, I think the strength of the script is always very important, and if you, the films that we've started where they're still writing the script are usually the ones that struggle a bit at the back end, because you need to start with a good, strong idea. And the only example I've got that kind of goes against that a bit was a film I worked on 4 or 5 years ago called Your Highness, where we had a script. It was a comedy. It was a funny script, but the director's style was to shoot the page of script and then throw the script away. And he'd do that with every single scene. And then he had 2 writers sat behind him, and they would write these new comedy lines and encourage the actors just to ad-lib and make up. And then if someone found a theme that was funny, they'd pursue it and they'd write extra stuff to go with it. And it took me quite a while to get, when you're doing effects, it's normally quite a military procedure. You plan what you're going to do and who's going to do what, and you position everything and you capture what you need. But there it was very, you have to go with the flow, think on your feet. So it turned out to be one of the funniest things I've ever done, because we laughed every single day, and the results of what came out of the free flow was much stronger than the scripted pages. So I've kind of gone against what I've said there, but to me it's about having a strong script and then having a strong director that can see that through as well.
And make it happen, yeah. So let's go with 2 more questions. There you go.
Hi, Phil McCauley. I was wondering what you think the UK government should do to encourage more investment in film in the UK and bring more work here.
Well, I think the answer is nothing, because this is rather controversial. My colleagues in the industry will slaughter me for having said that. But you know, we're lucky that we've had government support in terms of both previous governments and current governments in terms of the tax credit. So the fact that there is a long-term stability that we've seen is important. The percentage that they've had in place, while not being as generous as other parts of the world, has been consistent and supportable financially and so forth. So we don't have any debates in the community about, like they have in Canada, about, oh, we should be building more hospitals, or it's self-sustaining, the economic equation here. And it's obviously been fine-tuned recently, so the government again has responded to the fact that we sort of felt we needed it to be fine-tuned a bit. There's obviously money going into skill set and other places and that. So I could argue that government should intervene more, but I think when you look around the world, governments tend not to create jobs. It tends to be companies and individuals that create jobs, so the private sector that creates it. So the fact that I think was said earlier, we have a good environment. We have one that the regulations are in a reasonable place compared to some other parts of the world, that the funding for films is reasonable, that Hollywood studios like coming here. So I think it's more that we have to make sure that our clients keep coming here, we keep delivering good services, and the government's job, I think, is to ensure that the structure they've put in place and there aren't any glitches. So I think it's like stability rather than anything brand new would be my observation. The place that I think we're weakest in is the educational end of it, because as Mike said earlier, we used to hire 95% of our graduates from British colleges. It's probably down to 20% now. Now, we obviously are a bigger company and employing from all over Europe and that, but part of it is that our colleges sometimes haven't delivered the nature of the people that we needed, and that tended to do because they were facing government rather than us and working in partnership. So I think the educational space is something that government could spend more time in, and that's not unique to our sector. I think that applies to the economy at large, that some of the nature of the graduates that we're getting aren't necessarily economically ready, so to speak, that we have to spend 1 or 2 years sometimes getting people to a place where if they came in the first place in that way, they'd make them more competitive in the marketplace. So.
Yeah, it's the speed of change. The universities have certain curriculum needs that they have to hit, which is set by government policy, and then to be able to move at which the speed of change of new skill sets are in our industry, they just can't keep up with that. So unfortunately, their students then come out, and we have to train them.
Okay, so one last question. There you go. Wait for the microphone.
Thank you. You obviously started out in the early days when in computer games people were making things like Manic Miner, where conceptually somebody could create that in their living room. And then over time, obviously, games became incredibly complicated. You saw companies come and go in the dot-com boom as they bet on massive investment in a certain type of game. How dependent are you guys on commercially on working on a huge movie that is actually a very big commercial success? Or are you sufficiently spread across doing adverts or other areas? Or do you see that if you're allocating 400 people to something like Gravity, do you actually have to make a massive commercial bet? And do you get the upside that's tied to something being a huge global phenomenon like that?
The answer is no. I mean, we make our money, obviously, we're a for-hire company as a rule. We have had benefits from some of the work that we've done, but fundamentally, we have a portfolio of work. We try to make a profit on all of them. And then obviously our clients who are taking the risks, the Hollywood studios or the brand manager on the product, who's taking the risk, they get the upside of that. Having said that, Gravity obviously, nobody at Warner's expected Gravity financially to do the return. We all were proud of the film that we'd made. We felt that it would have the impact it would have in terms of visual and experience and all that. But given the nature of the story and what was perceived to be a limited appeal, because don't forget, the idea of originally just someone in a spacesuit in a sort of aluminium box having a problem wasn't necessarily mass market as appeal in that. So very few people would have bet that it took $800 million, including people at Warner's in the day. We were at the Venice Film Festival launching it and that, and we all agreed that recovering the money and being proud of what we'd done was a good day's work. So
Thank you.
Sandra Bullock, though, was...
she did fine.
She was on a point system. She's done very nicely.
There you go, yeah. Thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. We are now big fans of Framestore. I'm going to be following it personally for a very long time. If you can help, we can help as well. We can try to spread the word around Framestore and follow your movies. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Framestore, Mike and William.